Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Engineer, and on today's episode, we have Lynda Wilson. She's a firearms instructor and purchasing specialist here at Vance Outdoors. We discussed how she got started with Vance, firearm training and safety, situational awareness, being a female in a predominantly male industry, and we recapped our Women Keeping It Wild event we hosted last fall. Please welcome Lynda Wilson. Tell me when, man.
We are recording.
All right, we are live. Ladies, thank you for joining us today. We have Mindy as a special guest with us today. Mindy is on our marketing team. Mindy Bunce, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Did I say it right? Yeah, I said it right. Cool. And then Lynda Wilson is our special guest today. She's a purchasing specialist here at Vance Outdoors. Lynda, how are you?
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. And then obviously the man that you guys all know and love, Mr. Ben Johnson behind the switches. So Lynda is a purchasing specialist here at Vance Outdoors. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you here and what all you do here at Vance.
Sounds great. So I started my firearms career, I guess, about 5 years ago. I joined a group that started at Vance called the Well-Armed Woman and quickly became asked to be a leader. And as a leader, I had to become an instructor. That is the only reason that I became an instructor, but it very much blew up quickly from there as I found that I really enjoyed the firearms industry. I really enjoyed being with other women who were firearms people as well. And so I worked at another range for a year, got some good basic instructional training, and I was teaching a class at Vance in the Well-Armed Woman. One of the managers came in and was hiding from his adult duties. And it was, for both of us, a job interview that we did not realize was happening. He asked me to join the instructing staff. I told him no. He tells this story all the time in our classes.
And can we talk about who this is?
This would be Mark Leach, our assistant store manager and
Exactly.
training
Shout out to
manager.
Mark Leach.
Yep, and that would be at our Obetz location.
That's at our Obetz location.
For those of you that listen, obviously we've talked about Obetz. All the training and things that we do is at that range at our Obetz store.
So I talked to them a little bit more and decided to come on board. And so I was an instructor for several years, was looking at changing my big girl job, and an assistant buyer position came available at Vance's. I had a very impromptu interview one day. I was called upstairs in my t-shirt, jeans, ponytail, no makeup, with Mr. Todd Vance,
Love it.
Kevin Chandler, and Andrew and Ryan. Yeah, so I joined the upstairs staff, and then Regina decided to take retirement, and I took over her role as purchasing for clothing, Yeti, Black Rifle, several other lines.
Sure. Awesome. So you had previous experience with training.
Yes.
Remind me again the name of the organization again.
The Well-Armed Woman.
Well-Armed Women.
Which is now called Armed Women of America.
Now, is that just centrally based? At the time, obviously, with it being the America connection now, it's probably more national, or was it?
It is a national 501(c) nonprofit organization.
And they're primarily training women for the defense, or are they doing more educational altogether, or how does that work?
All educational, sporting, shooting, self-defense, all of it.
That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And so then obviously that has trans over to you were training at the store in Obetz.
Yes.
And so what kind of classes were you training prior to becoming the buyer, the purchasing side of the thing?
So I am involved in our concealed carry classes on almost 2 or 3, 4 times a month sometimes. And I'm involved in our Weaponcraft Wednesday, which is our basic pistol class after getting your concealed carry, right? Because you need to know a lot more about carrying a firearm than just putting in a holster and walking around.
Sure, yeah. I mean, because, and you hit the nail on the head, I mean, to take the class, they kind of teach you a little bit, but, looking at my class, it's been 10 years ago. and there certainly wasn't any defensive training post that.
Right.
You just know that you carry your weapon and, you're walking around, but in the situation when you really need it, are you prepared for that situation? And so that's where those classes probably definitely come and help.
Exactly. It's just like anything else in life. If you want to get better at something,
Sure.
you have to practice, you have to train, you have to put yourself under a little bit of stress and learn things. So if you want to play Major League Baseball, there's a lot of practice that you have to do leading up to that. You can't just walk on the field and say, oh, I want to play.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right? If you want to get better at golf, you play and you practice more than once a year.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we kind of touched on it offline a little bit too, but before we get started in that, obviously we have Mindy here with us as well. And so Mindy is a non-concealed carry individual, correct?
Correct, yes.
Correct.
But she has background in firearms.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she has background in firearms and being outdoors and hunting and what have you. So, I mean, as a woman, what would you look forward to in some type of like concealed class or concealed training? Is there anything in particular that you would want to, I guess, where a Lynda could come into play and help with that? Or do you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, so I would definitely be interested in taking a class to conceal carry. It's just not something that I felt that I needed recently, I guess. But I think it's something great to have. And so I would look forward to maybe spending some time in a class with you at some point.
Definitely love that.
Yeah.
Could do private lessons first, get you more used to, the firearm and shooting. And I think it's really important that people understand that a concealed carry license, the classroom part of it is more about the laws,
Sure.
about when you can, when you can't, where you can go, where you can't go,
Yeah.
versus learning to shoot multiple targets,
Yeah.
learning to shoot in the dark. Right, all of those things
Yeah.
are important, and that doesn't happen in a concealed carry class.
No, you're just basically like you said, learning about that. And then I think the biggest thing that I always found from this concealed classes is that you're, in America, sometimes you're not, have to be proven guilty. Well, in a concealed situation or a crisis situation, well, you are guilty. Now you have to, here's the legal side of that. And I think that was the biggest thing for me during my concealed classes is that you kind of learned that as you went through. But like you were saying, and like we said before, I mean, that's all well and good. But, if I'm walking in an alley or I'm, somewhere with my family or whatever have you, and that crisis happens, again, you're not prepared. So that's where these classes come into play. So
Definitely.
For someone that, like a Mindy who doesn't have their license, or for someone who'd be interested in that, kind of walk us through the process of what kind of classes people should take here at Vance and kind of how that progression looks from kind of the start to beginning.
As an instructor, I would always recommend that someone takes a basic handgun class to learn how a firearm operates, how to manipulate it, learn those safety rules. That's really important to know the safety part of it first. Know how to put your ammunition in your magazine so that it's not backwards, because that's not going to work for you. And I think that's more important, to get those basic understanding of firearms before you take a CHO class.
Sure.
But we do have many, many people. I think 8 of our people yesterday had never handled a firearm before. And I think that's kind of backwards, that somebody is trying to carry a gun to save their life, to protect, but they don't know how to use it yet.
For sure. And so then once they kind of get through that basic introduction of classes, what would be the next step for someone like that? So say they get through their basic and they're learning this. Obviously, range time would be huge.
Definitely range time, and have some range time with someone who knows what they're doing, because I can practice all day, every day, but if I'm not practicing the right way, then I'm making those wrong or bad habits permanent. And it's hard to change after the fact once you've already learned how to do something incorrectly.
Yeah, exactly. So then the defensive class. So let's say they get to the point they've shot their range time, they're feeling more comfortable with their weapon. Maybe they went and they purchased and shot on their own time. How does that, I mean, what's the outlook of the defensive classes? Like, how do we train? Obviously, we have the Megget training system at the store. So do we use any of that, or is it anything particular?
No, so once you get past that CHO class and you're in other classes with us, we're on the opposite side of those benches.
Okay.
So we're in the open range where safety becomes extremely important.
Sure.
There's nothing between you and the person next to you.
Okay.
So like a Weaponcraft Wednesday, we start that first night learning how to draw from holster. Part of that is, right, because you have to have a good purchase on that gun. You have to have a good grip on it, get it up and on target. But if you can't even get it out of the holster properly and be safe that way, so then we go and we practice that for 2 hours. And then the next week we move on and teach you how to reload.
Sure.
Right?
You practice for 2 hours just taking the firearm out of the holster?
Yes.
Okay.
Taking it out, taking a shot, putting it back in safely. Take it out, take a shot. And then we move on to multiple shots. But there's talking in between as well, and we're fixing things, fixing grips, fixing how they're using their sights, all of that. But to actually perform things correctly, you have to get your brain trained to do that. Yeah. So even myself, I will draw from holster 100 times a week. Just to keep that fresh. Every morning before I leave my house, with whatever clothing I have on that day, I practice getting that clothing out of the way and getting to my gun. It's a lot.
It just seems so tedious.
But if you want to be confident in your skills,
Sure.
you have to practice.
Well, it's that second nature thing too.
Yeah.
Because when when stuff hits the fan, you don't have time to think. It needs to be more reactionary. Like
Exactly.
You need to know what to do already.
Yeah, that happened to me in New York. I was with a school group in New York, being a chaperone, and of course I couldn't have my gun in New York.
Oh, of course.
But I was doing what I do because that's how I'm trained. I'm scanning people, looking at people. And when I scanned back towards my group of kids I was watching, this gentleman had moved up against my daughter's back. I immediately stepped towards him, pushed him off, but my right hand went straight to where my gun was supposed to be.
Just a habit.
Because that's what I had trained my brain to do in a dangerous situation.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I wanted to touch on that because we had kind of talked a little bit before about self-awareness and children in high schools and colleges.
Yes.
Let's get some of your outtake on that in terms of, just that overall preparedness and not being glued to your phone and all that good stuff that we all are guilty of.
Exactly. Awareness is so important in life in general, but definitely as that self-protection, that first line of defense, because if you're not looking around at people, if you're not paying attention to what they're doing, what's in their hands, if it's 95 degrees outside and you see somebody in a heavy winter coat, that should be a clue that something's not quite right.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we're not looking around as we're walking, I look people in the eye, I smile, I say hello all the time.
Yeah. So they know that you have acknowledged them and you know their presence.
I know I've looked at their face. I know what they look like. I'm paying attention. They know I'm not an easy target. Sure. So, but if you're walking around with your face in your phone or you're not paying attention, then somebody can be on you before you even know it. And that's the worst place, right? You can avoid if you're paying attention.
Yeah. Are we doing any type of training or any type of classes for that self-awareness, or is that something that we need to look forward to?
We need to look forward to that.
Sure.
We have the ability. I am an instructor for Refuse to be a Victim, which is a fantastic class for just that awareness part of it in all aspects of life, not just with a firearm. It's with your banking and your passwords and cybersecurity. All of that needs to be paid attention to. But Mark Leach and I are also working on a class for high school, like 18, 17 to 22, those college students as well, on awareness and paying attention and some of the non-lethal forms of self-defense.
Yeah, and I mean, not to say the Ohio State's a bad place, but obviously it's one of the biggest campuses in the country, and so there's a lot of walking and a lot of unpreparedness opportunities, if you will, and so our presence in Columbus and what we can do to try to help, I mean, educate women or educate all people, really, not just women, I guess, but I mean, all people to kind of just be prepared and to take a look at that. So I wanted to kind of segue just a little bit here and kind of double back on something. So obviously, you're working in a predominantly male-driven industry with the firearms, unfortunately, in some regards. But, can you kind of talk about that and kind of the process and maybe the mindset that you have in regard to that?
I can tell you things have changed quite a bit, definitely over the last 4 years for sure. Prior to that, when I would go to a gun store and I was with a male, the salesman would talk to the male.
Sure.
Even though I was the one looking at a gun, I was the one purchasing it, but they wouldn't even acknowledge me. And that has changed a lot, and especially at Vance, they're very good about talking to the women and what do you need.
So when you're shopping for a gun as a woman, and they assume that you want like a pretty pink or purple colored gun, and you pick out, just the normal black carry gun, are they surprised by that? Because I feel like they're expecting you to buy something, pretty.
So for me, I'm going to acknowledge them for doing that and say, just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I need a pink or a purple gun.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Right? I will throw it back in their face just to teach them to not have that mindset. It's, for me, I'm not a fan of the pretty pink and purple and blue guns. It draws attention to you.
Yeah, they have their place for people.
They
but,
do.
I mean, they do have their place.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's all going to be based on the individual. I mean,
what finish do you like best? Do you like the black or the FDE, or what is it that you look for in a handgun?
For me, it's not about the color as much as how it fits my hand.
Right.
Does my finger fit to the trigger properly? Do I have a good gap so that I'm not dragging my finger against the frame and causing movement as I fire?
Yeah.
Can I reach all the controls properly without moving my hands? That's the important part for me.
Is the capacity a factor for you at all?
Absolutely. So
Why?
Recently I switched firearms from a very tiny little gun because as I do this job and I'm in this industry more, I've learned that I need to have more rounds on me. Hollywood lies to us. They tell us it takes 1 round. It may take lots more, right?
Exactly.
Depending on what that person's will is, depending on their body composition.
Your aim.
Right.
If they're on drugs or something like that.
All of that comes into play. So for me, I switched to a larger gun that has more capacity so that I have the ability to take care of more than one target if I need to.
Very good.
But it's all, I can carry a different gun that holds more. It's larger, but it's not good for me to do that all day, every day.
It's harder to conceal, I would imagine.
It is harder to conceal.
Especially when you're tiny like yourself.
Well, kind
to
of.
hide a larger gun.
But it can be done.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And that smaller capacity, those smaller, tiny guns are not always fun to shoot. And if it's not fun to shoot, are you going to want to practice with it?
Oh, yeah. And that's the most important thing is that if you have to have something that you enjoy being around and shooting. And
Yes.
So we kind of segued just a little bit there, but let's talk about that because your question was great. So, I'm a first-time buyer, male, female, whatever have you. What should I be looking for in terms of firearm purchases right off the bat? And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's go into a little bit more of a detail of like that first time purchase. What should someone expect or should someone look forward to? And Mindy, feel free if you have anything too.
So the first thing you have to decide is what style, right? Do you want a revolver? Do you want a semi-automatic? and they both have their place.
Sure.
Do you want something that has an external safety or not an external safety? They all have safety mechanisms inside.
But that's a sticky point for people to want to really, truly understand, because they feel sometimes, I feel non-safety, external safety guns feel less safe. But it really just depends on your training, right?
There's really only one true safety.
Yeah.
And that's your finger.
Exactly.
So as long as you're paying attention to those safety rules, the external safety is really more of a mental thing. But if you have an external safety, you make sure you practice with it. Because most people come to the range, they turn off the safety. They shoot their 50-round box, and then they put the safety back on and put it away. But if you don't operate that safety every time, then you've trained your brain that in that oh no moment, I draw my gun and I don't turn my safety off and I get click, click, click.
Yeah.
Building muscle memory.
Exactly.
You have to practice with it if that's what you're going to carry.
Exactly.
Yep.
So it's more of a, sometimes people come in and they're like, I have to have this gun because someone told them that's the best one.
Sure.
But that might not be the best one for them. So I would encourage people to go to the range and rent them, shoot them before you buy one.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Good job. No, and we actually mentioned that. And I think we did obviously range promotions and stuff too, but we have tons and tons of guns that people can come and try out and see which one fits best for them prior to even purchasing one. So.
Absolutely.
So, obviously action, whether it would be, a striker fired pistol, like a Glock or something like that, revolvers, capacity. I mean, you obviously said more capacity, but, most concealed carries guns, not all, but most are single stack. And so do you think, size, we should take that in consideration too for the individual, whether, man hands like Ben or, they're more of a petite, that kind of thing too?
Definitely, because it has to fit you. I had a gentleman that was about 6'5" in class, and he had the little teeny tiny Ruger 380.
Sure.
Well, the gun was smaller than his palm. And so once we got into the range, he realized, I can't operate this. My hands are too big.
Yeah.
And so that's something definitely to consider about. And for women, if you're going to carry inside the waistband, guess what? That number on your pants is probably going to go up.
Yeah.
And that's okay. The number on your pants is not as important as being able to protect yourself.
No, well said. Well said.
Yeah, no matter what, man or woman,
Yes.
your pant size goes up when you put that holster and firearm in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a good thing they have other types of concealment.
Yes, yes. There are many, many different ways to conceal many different places as long as you practice with wherever it is.
So are you primarily appendix carry? Are you more on the outside? How are you? What's your primary go-to?
My go-to is always appendix.
Appendix carry.
Unless I carry my larger gun, and then it's
On the
just
side.
outside the appendix, but same vicinity. So if I'm 2 inches away, I'm 2 inches away. It's
Sure.
not a different complete area.
Now, are you carrying the same weapon throughout the seasons? Like typically I would be able to carry more of my full size during the winter because I'm wearing sweatshirts and what have you, and then go to something smaller during the summer, or do you keep the same firearm with all
I
throughout
keep the same firearm or the same system.
Sure.
So it's not one has a safety and one doesn't. I have a little bit larger gun than I normally carry, but I switched the trigger, so the trigger is exactly the same.
Okay.
So I have the same feel no matter what.
Perfect. So let's get back on to, with the being a female and being an instructor, she smiles. What kind of, obviously now people know, you know what you're talking about clearly, but how does that always, do you always have a little bit of a barrier when people are coming in for training, or I guess how is all that? Or are they more open in general because they're novice, or?
The women are excited.
Yeah.
They're probably more comfortable.
Right. And we
for
do
sure.
some all women's classes as well for CHL because there are women who have some history with issues that they don't want a man in the room when they're doing that. Plus, there are times where they've had some serious issues and we get in the range and they break down.
Yeah.
And we have to build them back up. And by the time we're done, they're excited, they're over it for the most part. But I think it's harder for men when there's a female instructor.
Yeah.
Because they don't think a woman can teach them anything. But it's in the confidence in your abilities, it's in the confidence in what you're teaching that makes the difference.
Yeah. And I think you had mentioned too that you sat in on one class. Ben, I'm talking to Ben here. You sat on one class too and learned a ton.
Oh, yeah.
Just in 10 minutes or something like that?
I took Weaponcraft Wednesday, a couple classes, and Lynda was one of the instructors, and she really called me out, and I was like, okay. You know, like some of the stuff, like and it goes back to practice. Like I hadn't been training, and I think Kelly was in the class too, and I think I was just there to film. And I think Kelly said, well, Ben, you want to shoot? And I'm like, okay. And I think it was like 40 feet or something like that, and it was bad. It showed the trigger pull was not where it needed to be, and Lynda's like, looks like Ben needs to practice. And
Right.
I mean, personally, I love that because I'm there to learn. I'm not there to stereotype anybody. I'm there to see how to get better and train and everything like that. So.
Right, but not everyone's there for that. Some people are just there because they have to be there to take the class to get the piece of plastic that says they can do this.
Yeah.
Right, and I hope that by the end of our class that we can show that there's so much more to it, and there's so much more to carrying a firearm.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're taking away anything from this, it's, it's that there's much more than just having it on your hip. That's not, I mean, people probably die every day of having a gun on their hip, but they weren't truly prepared to use it.
Exactly.
So
taking classes really open your eyes to all that stuff too, because if you don't have any idea, and you go take a Weaponcraft Wednesday class,
I guarantee you she's going to call me out on something because I haven't shot from the holster in a
well,
long
it's
time.
like if you're not practicing defeating, your holster to get on target, and they're going to see where your flaws are and tell you, and you're like, wow, I really need to practice.
Right.
And it comes with every step on that Weaponcraft Wednesday. It's like shooting while you're moving, shooting in low light, reloading your firearm. Reloading is huge. Like what if your firearm jams?
Yeah.
You have to know how to clear the jam, reload, all that stuff, and it's huge. If you don't practice that stuff, you're stuck.
Exactly.
For sure.
And then add pressure to that. Add someone trying to attack you.
Yeah.
Your heart rate's up. You've got tunnel vision. You don't think about all that stuff if you
for sure.
don't go and take any classes or learn about it.
And that's what we stress so much in our concealed handgun classes. This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
This is only the first step in your journey, because there is so much more to learn, right? How do you shoot when you're walking or running or moving?
Yeah.
How do you reload while you're moving? All of those things are important to know how to do.
The percentage of people that take those like introductory classes, I mean, do you see them continuing their education with the store in terms of the more of the refined or the upgraded kind of classes as they go through? Or do you just kind of see people just kind of come and leave? Or how have you noticed a trend on that or anything?
As a majority, they don't come back to a further class.
To further expand
there
it.
are a certain percentage that do. I would love to see more women coming back into our advanced classes. But that's more of that's a getting it out there and getting them to understand.
Yeah.
I always introduce both of our women's groups that meet advances, because being with other women in the industry gives you more confidence to keep training and keep getting better.
Yeah, and it's something that people need to prioritize too. I mean, obviously we all live very busy lives, and so, I guess you just have to, you don't think about it unless you're actually there and you need that situation. So it's hard for people probably to want to continue further in their education, because they're like, and this is where we're coming at you, like, need to take these classes, and you need to continue your education, because, you're going to kind of get hung up if not. So.
Well, and the price of ammo right now has definitely affected our advanced classes, because we shoot anywhere from 150 to 250 rounds in a advanced class.
Sure.
And that's a lot of money for people.
I mean,
Plus the price of the class and everything. It's a good
class.
chunk of change. But have you guys ever thought about doing like a lower round count class for stuff like that, or is that something that you don't think should be done in a advanced class like that?
Well, we do allow people to short shoot. So as we want people to have 3 magazines when we do our advanced classes or our Weaponcraft Wednesday. And we like to have you shoot those full 150 to 250 rounds because it gives you that good repetition with your gun. But if you don't have the financial ability to do that, come anyway and just dry fire.
Yeah.
Because dry fire practicing can increase your skills immensely, right?
For sure.
You just
for
don't
sure.
have the bang and the recoil, but the rest of it's all still there. The mechanics of it is all there.
No, that's cool. I want to let's talk. I mean, we had talked earlier too about the rifle stuff. Like, what kind of difference? I mean, obviously, there's a clear difference between defensive rifle and defensive handgun. I mean, kind of how is that laid out? I mean, what was the what's the schedule, if you will, of training for something like that as opposed to a concealed carry or handgun class?
So rifles are way more fun than handguns.
Sure. Of course.
And we don't care what kind of rifle you bring. It's, we have people with 22s, we have people with ARs, and it's just fun to learn how to get that rifle up and on target.
Yeah.
It's different changing out the magazines on them than it is a handgun. It's heavier to hold, so you have to think about that and how do I keep this on target, and a lot of people use a red dot when they're with a rifle, so that's a whole different issue of managing where you're hitting on your target because you have the sight over bore and all of that information depending on how far out you are.
Sure, cool. Well, I want to change gears a little bit completely here. We last fall we hosted a Women Keeping It Wild event.
Yes.
And so I wanted to kind of dive into that and I didn't have the opportunity to go. But obviously Mindy went and Lynda kind of headed up. Let's kind of promote that and kind of just talk about the event itself and kind of what your guys' thoughts were on that this year.
All right. So this was my first year hosting it. Regina had done that in the past because we'd done 2 or 3 of them prior.
Yeah, so Regina headed that up originally 3 years ago, I believe was the first one. And it's just grown and so much since then. And I think it's just a great event to get the ladies together and learn about some hunting and, preparing what you hunt, and just to hang out and feel comfortable discussing all of that stuff with people that are very like-minded.
Sure.
So, and now Linda's taken that over and she's done wonderful, and I'm excited to see where we're going to be headed with that this year.
For those of you that are kind of local, so we hosted this event at the Buckeye Winery.
Buckeye Lake Winery.
Buckeye Lake Winery. Excuse me, there is a Buckeye Winery, but Buckeye Lake Winery on the south side of the lake near Fairfield Beach. And so if you're familiar with that area, that's where this was hosted.
Yes.
And so we had a meal that was catered towards wild game, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we had wild boar and what was the other?
There was a chili.
Yes.
I forget what the
Was it elk chili?
Maybe.
Oh, it was elk chili.
Yeah.
It was all very delicious.
Right.
And they've done that every year. It's always been, wild game feast. So, I think it's great.
So for me, it's an odd bird, right? Because I am on the self-protection part. I am all about carrying a gun for self-protection. I personally don't have an interest in hunting. I don't eat wild game, but that's my choice, right? And that is anyone's choice. But Mindy does, and she hunts, and Jackie hunts, and I know a lot of women who do, and I think it's fantastic. And we do this event to educate and bring more women into hunting because it's something they can do with their husband. They can do it with other ladies. They can teach their kids, right? It's not just a man's thing anymore.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And I guess that was, I'm glad you said that because shooting is not for everyone. Hunting isn't for everyone. But at the end of the day, it's like, you're probably learning something about that industry.
Definitely.
Just as if Mindy would learn something about the shooting industry. So that's why we want to have these events, is try to continue to build that education with the women, and obviously passing that on to the rest of their family, or it's something that they can do with their spouse now. Now it's a husband and wife thing that they can do together because they both understand it in both regards, whether it's the shooting or the wild game and the hunting side.
Absolutely, definitely, yeah. It's definitely an interesting, fun night. So we bring in some speakers. We have lots and lots of prizes that we give away. We have a great meal. Drink a little bit of wine. So
just a little bit, Mindy. just a little bit.
Just a little.
How many people do you think we had? How many attendees did we have this year?
We limit it to 50.
To 50.
Yeah, just because of space issues,
sure.
right? And there's a couple that comes every year. I had no idea that we allowed men to come because it's women keeping it wild. So I was like, oh, well, you could, wait here or we'll be done about this time. It's like, oh, no, I'm attending. Okay, great. Awesome.
So they're welcome, but not expected.
Right? We have had some conversations about maybe doing a couples event.
That would be cool.
At some point.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
So
that'd be cool. We just talked to Justin, which that episode aired today. They were also with American Hero Hunt, and they were going to do something in the same regards where it's, they have these veterans coming out, but let's bring their spouses with them and have a family night too. So I think, anytime that you can get both parties involved in whatever relationship you have, I think it's just, it makes it something more enjoyable to do and more understanding. Now I know why, my husband or wife wants to go and be gone for 2 days to hunt or whatever have you. So,
right. I can imagine it's probably very quiet, relaxing. You're shut down from everything and kind of get a little recharge.
Oh,
it's like a meditation type of thing.
Yeah.
It's like a Zen.
I mean,
for me anyway.
Oh, for sure. And we talk about this all the time. It's the killing part is definitely not in that regard. The killing it's the icing on the cake, if you will, right?
When you harvest your meal.
Exactly. But the shutting everything down, turning the phone off, listening to the breeze, listening to the noise, squirrels, whatever have you, we're such in busy lives and hectic lives and with kids and jobs and travel and whatever have you. So it's nice to kind of unplug and get out from the world. So
I used to volunteer with a different organization that did veteran hunts.
Yeah.
And I ran the kitchen for them for a couple of years. And it's very rewarding to see the camaraderie between the guides and the veterans and when they come back and because we really pamper them.
Yeah.
And they deserve that. They've done something great for our country. Some of them are quite wounded, either physically or mentally, and to be able to adapt bows so that they can still hunt or, make that adaptation with a wheelchair or whatever it is, so that they can still do what they used to do, just in a little bit different way.
Oh, for sure.
That's great.
For sure. Well, that's about all I had in closing. Again, let's just touch on that advice again, coming back to the shooting, whether you're male or female, just a quick overview, what should someone be looking to do to get started today?
So to get started today, find a gun that fits you. Go to a range, try out a bunch of different handguns, find what works for you. That's how I found my first one. I took 2 in, I shot 5 shots out of each one. Whichever one I liked better, I kept, and then I tried a different one. And just try a bunch to see what they're like, because they don't fit every person the same way. And then go in to get a private instruction or take a basic class before you jump into the world of concealed carry, and make sure it's really right for you.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming in this morning. I'm glad to have Mindy. I'm glad you guys were able to talk.
Yeah, this was fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Great.
All right, everyone, that is all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed that conversation with Lynda. If you're in the Central Ohio area, be sure to check out our list of firearm training classes on our website. Who knows, you may even get her as an instructor. As always, we appreciate you listening. Please give us a rating and definitely be sure to share us with a friend. It helps us grow the show and continue to provide you with the best guests we can. And until next time, enjoy the pursuit.